Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Apologies for the length of time in between the last video and this one, but I've been moving house. It's all been a little bit chaotic, and it's kind of the first moment I've been able to really sit down and do one. So hence a slightly different background, very different colour. And you may also, just to absolutely epitomise the incredible professionalism of these videos, you may hear work going on outside on the road. They're doing various things, so you might hear reversing trucks, diggers, anything could happen. That's pretty much sums up Tottenham, doesn't it? So it kind of is quite fitting, I guess. So although I have been moving house, I have been also at games. Unfortunately, made the very wet and misty journey down to Falmer for the Brighton game, which was a freezing cold night in the Amex Stadium. Any of the journos there will tell you that. I've said this before, but often, I feel incredibly privileged to be able to be inside these stadiums, and obviously everyone else can't be in there, and I feel like I'm very fluky, very lucky to be in there. As I know I've said this before in a couple of games this season, I did not feel that way on Sunday night. I felt very much like I wish I was at home with everyone else, just having to be able to turn off the telly, as it were, because it was horrible. Absolutely rotten performance. I'm not going to go into that performance too much because we've got far more kind of pressing things to talk about, but it was pretty dire. And I really don't mean Eric, because he didn't even play. He was on the bench. We'll come to him in a little bit. But it was just, rotten, I think is the way to do it. It's a way to talk about it. It was a team that had no invention, no inspiration, no real motivation at points. Summed up by one shot in the first half, Bergwijn's off-target effort, and I think it was only 7 more in the second half. Brighton in all had 16 shots, and Brighton played well, very organised, very good down the flanks, but Tottenham made them look like Barcelona at times. It was just so poor. And coming after the Liverpool game, where that match just kind of got progressively worse as it went on for Spurs, it just kind of felt that they took it into the next game. It was really poor. Didn't agree with Mourinho afterwards. He was kind of going off down this line about how much better the second half was. It was all pretty awful. Very poor performance. Pretty much, I'm trying to think of anyone that really came out with any credit. Possibly Vinicius off the bench, but again, we'll come to him in a second because there's much more to talk about with him. It was just very poor. Using on a veries. I've just realised this kind of new place that I'm sitting to do this, and the lighting looks slightly like I'm a hostage, and I should really hold up a newspaper like this to tell you exactly what the date is. I know sometimes we feel like that, certainly Tottenham fans, you feel like you're a hostage sometimes because you've got no other choice. In a way, you're kind of born into supporting Tottenham, and recent matches have been very tough to watch. And I think that the thing that probably is the most worrying for me about the Brighton performance was there were little shades, little echoes of the Brighton performance under Poch towards the end of his era. Obviously, he didn't ship 3 goals. They didn't have a terrible injury to Hugo Lloris, but very much in terms of the insipid display out there, and the kind of, I'm not going to go as far to say they weren't playing for the manager. I don't think that's fair, but just almost like a fear factor, a worry about taking risks, about trying things. It was like a team kind of scared. I don't know what of. Scared of the manager, scared of being left out the next game, scared of the criticism, whether it be from the media or the fans watching on telly. I don't know, but it just had those little echoes of that match. God, what was that now? Way more than a year ago, wasn't it? I think maybe 14, 15 months ago. That was a very poor day. But it was. Yeah, it just really. I think the important thing, I know after the game, the only way you can really gauge fan opinion right now is because obviously we don't have the fans in the grounds. We don't have, the travelling Tottenham faithful are amazing. I've praised them so many times in the past, but when I go to away games and I hear, before all of this mess of the pandemic, when you had the away faithful at matches. Sorry, you are going to hear a digger reversing outside. But when you get that throng of fans, a couple of thousand, they're incredible. They're so noisy, they're so supportive, they're fantastic. I think even on Sunday night, those supportive away faithful, the kind of, I don't want to say ultras because that's kind of has different connotations nowadays with football fans, but that kind of hardcore support, even I think they, would have had a tough time not booing or showing their frustration at Sunday's performance. And I think, as I said before, I think Mourinho's been very lucky in that respect that the fans haven't made their feelings known in stadiums, because I think it would make things a lot more difficult for him. But I think the only way we can kind of gauge stuff now is social media, which for me, there's good sides and bad sides. You've heard me kind of say what I think about social media and the good and bad of it, and I do feel that there was a lot of reaction after the game, of course, about Mourinho. A lot of people, maybe got to the end of the tether of the football. There's no denying the football's been pretty awful to watch. I don't think you can sugarcoat it. I think there's been very much a pragmatic safety first, and then individuals kind of have to produce a bit of magic. And then when they do, you do get some lovely football, the likes of Kane and Son, Tanguy and Dembele. When they're kind of flying, then magic happens and you get beautiful football. But ultimately, it's kind of almost like the team isn't set up to do that. That's almost like a byproduct, a hopeful thing that happens. And I totally understand that. I also understand, I suppose, from Mourinho's perspective, he's trying to find some solidity to a team, some foundation to the team to build upon. The Pochettino defence, I've said it before, was a very, very good defence. It's had the joint best record in the Premier League for 2 or 3 years running. So it's been there. I think it's just been a case of rebuilding that defence from what was an ageing defence. Obviously Rose, Alderweireld, Vertonghen, Walker, they've all kind of, other than Alderweireld, have gone their separate ways now. Kind of. Rose is still there, but again, another one we'll come to later. And Mourinho's kind of had to build that, but it's really hasn't been a very attractive process to watch. And the problem right now is, I just want to say on social media, I saw a very good thread which I think kind of sums up. It was kind of digging out some fans, but in a way it was protecting their names. I think we're all guilty of kind of changing our minds, but I thought it was quite interesting. I think was it Nathan Clark on Twitter, the chap that does lots of tactical stuff. He had tweets from people after the summer transfer window going crazy, not going crazy, but saying how good it was, giving it 8, 9, 10 out of 10. And then those same people's tweets at the end of the transfer deadline day yesterday saying how the squad, how awful it was, and how, needed, like they were listing like centre-backs, midfielders, playmakers, blah, blah, blah. And you kind of think, well, what's changed in 3 months from the squad that you really liked to begin with? And I think the point I'm trying to get at is that's kind of how social media works. And again, we're all guilty of it. I sometimes will contradict myself in things I'll say. That's one of the downsides of talking so much and writing so much. You're undoubtedly going to contradict yourself at times. But yeah, I think that's football fandom, and I think that's why kind of social media isn't the best gauge, which is why I'd love to have the fans back in the ground again to kind of see what they really make of it. And likewise, they could push the team on and they could alter the way things are, because Sunday was just so poor. As far as I understand it, Daniel Levy still retains full faith in Mourinho. What we've got to understand is Daniel Levy has wanted Mourinho for years. I think he first tried to get him at Porto when he was there, and when he ended up going to Chelsea. Daniel Levy has kind of not put his neck on the line, that's too much to say, but he's certainly invested a lot into getting Mourinho to the club. So he's not likely to ditch him, after just over a year or so. I think the thing that will probably define Mourinho's tenure going forward will be the players. I think that's the key thing, is going to be his relationship with the players. We know the different kinds of Mourinho. We know the them and us Mourinho that we've seen before, that creates this incredible siege mentality within a club, and all the players will die for him. We've also seen the Mourinho that will sometimes alienate players, and he'll be ultra critical about certain players and maybe lets others get away with things. And that can be risky. It can create divides, and you've got to pick your battles very carefully. He does have a habit of sometimes going into clubs and trying to pick a fight with the biggest stars or the biggest voices, as it were. And you look at the people he's fallen out with at Tottenham now. I say fallen out with. I mean, look, Mourinho's got a very provoking style. That's what he does, you know. Anyone that's worked with him will tell you that. Even if he really likes you, he will try to provoke you. He will try to see what reactions he gets from you and kind of learn all about you and stuff. So it has its successes. Tanguy Ndombele, obviously, has been an unqualified success. He was pushed, he was prodded, and Mourinho's kind of got him where he wants him to be. He's had a bit of a dip in the last couple of games, but I don't think that's anything you can blame him for, because I think everyone's like that. Even Son, you know, has been superb this season. Even he's looked out of sorts in the last couple of games, and I think that's because of the way the team is playing and the lack of service and all of that. But yeah, so if you look at the players that Mourinho's kind of pushed to the sides, whether it be long term or short term, you've got Danny Rose, obviously. Danny Rose isn't even in the squads. Dele Alli, who again we'll come to in a bit, has barely hasn't started a Premier League match since, was it West Ham? After the restart last season? Sorry, of course Everton. He's only started the one, and that was then. But since then, I think that's the only game he started for a long, long time. Obviously, he had a little injury towards the end of last season. So you've got Rose, Ali, Toby Alderweireld. People maybe, you know, glossed over this one slightly. Toby Alderweireld was loving Mourinho when he first came. You know, possibly didn't have the best relationship with Pochettino, but when Mourinho came and it was like the saviour had arrived, he signed a new contract, everything was rosy. If you look at the this season, Alderweireld's started or played in roughly half of the Premier League games. He's very much been pushed out to be not an important player in the Premier League. So you've got Rose, Ali, Alderweireld, Harry Winks. Harry Winks has missed out on a load of Premier League squads when it was 7 subs instead of 9. He's, you know, played really not a big amount of matches this season, particularly in the Premier League. So, Serge Aurier, we know obviously stuff went down on Thursday night in the Liverpool game at half time. Very unhappy, whether it be at the substitution or whether it be at stuff that was said at half time. He obviously, it's kind of widely known now, he went off and left the stadium. And even Eric Dyer, I'm led to believe Mourinho was really disappointed with his performance against Liverpool, and that's why he was on the bench on Sunday night, unused. So, I mean, you just look at those names: Rose, Ali, Alderweireld, Winks, Aurier and Dyer. That's big voices, big people in the changing room. I think you can get away with maybe 1 or 2 of those. But if you're kind of picking fights with all of them, you know, it's a tough place to go, because a lot of those people are very popular, very much have friends in the dressing room, and if they're treated in a certain way, that will rub off with the others, who will kind of look at that and think that's not really fair. I mean, you could even say Gareth Bale. Gareth Bale's a slightly different case, but, you know, obviously he's been very underused by Mourinho. You probably watched Sunday's match and understand why, which is so disappointing. I thought he was really bright against Wickham. I thought you saw the little kind of things that were good that were coming back into his play. And Sunday, he just kind of very poor, very, very poor, really lacking in ideas and kind of, yeah, not motivation, but just inspiration, I think it's probably the way to say it. So I think that will be the key. It's very much how Mourinho manages his relationship with the players. I think there's got to be some compromise. There's got to be some not battling against everyone just for the sake of it. That might have been something that maybe worked at previous clubs or in a different time. I think the players of today, perhaps more sensitive. Perhaps people on the whole in society are maybe more sensitive nowadays. You know, we're not all kind of 1950s, nothing, pretending nothing bothers us kind of people anymore. We're kind of, it sounds like a bit of a therapy session, you know, more open to our feelings, I guess. And I think that applies across everything. It applies across football. And perhaps footballers nowadays are slightly more intricate people to manage. And I do wonder whether he's going to have to kind of, well, I suppose, mend some bridges with some people and maybe just take a less confrontational style to certain ways he deals with people, because it's all well and good when things are going well. Like, we could understand why Dele was being left out early in the season because Spurs were winning games. You could understand why Winks wasn't playing because Højbjerg and Sissoko were doing very well. And you can understand some of these things, but then then sometimes when they're not, it starts to come across as stubborn. It starts to come across as just deliberately kind of wedging yourself into a corner. And you look at the stats now, and it just don't make as good reading. Only 3 wins in the last 11 Premier League matches. They've lost 4 out of the last 8. Mourinho will tell you, as is his right, that Spurs have only lost 5 in the last 30 matches, which obviously paints a different picture of it. But obviously, you're taking in a lot of FA Cup and Europa League games into that against not the greatest of opposition. And some of those wins have come across against the likes of Leeds and Sheffield United. There's been a fair few draws in there. There's something's not quite right with Tottenham right now. They've lost the rhythm, they've lost the confidence, and Mourinho's got to draw on all of his experience. The fans will be back. We don't know when, whether it will be this season or not. You'd hope it will. You'd hope it will be in the months ahead. And he's got to get Tottenham playing in a way that is not going to have people either A, booing, or B, not turning up. Because that's when the club then have to kind of look into it a bit deeper, because this club need money, they need fans in the ground. And if the fans don't even want to come to watch the football because it's so dull, then you have that knock-on effect financially. It's... even the Aurier stuff. I asked him about Aurier after the match, and I said, he's not here in the squad today. Can you explain exactly why he's not here today? And he said, it was a technical decision. And I was really happy with that technical decision because I thought Moussa Sissoko played very well. It depends how you define very well. If, Spurs were playing with a back 3, different back 3 this time, with Rodon in a different role and Ben Davies on one side, Moussa Sissoko on the right. Moussa Sissoko, the aim of a wing-back, in the ideal Tottenham wing-back scenario, you probably would have Reguilon and Aurier. Maybe Doherty, if he was fully of confidence and not playing like he did against Liverpool. But you'd have flying fullbacks that offensively are a real threat. Moussa Sissoko is not that. He didn't really know what to do in the final third, and that's because that's not his game. So I was a bit to say he did well. And bearing in mind he didn't use Doherty or Tanganga were both on the bench and could have played that role if required. It didn't really wash with me. Technical decision's a bit of a funny one. It's a very much... Poch used to use that expression. He used to use it when he'd left Alderweireld or Trippier at home for Champions League matches. It kind of just masks whatever they actually happened, really. I think we can all kind of gather what happened. I think Aurier's on the naughty step. Be interesting to see whether he returns for Chelsea or whether it's a longer stay on that step or not. But the one that really, really baffled me, again, I have to say this as much as I can. I am not a Premier League manager. I am not... Jose Mourinho has won 25 trophies in 20 years. What do I know compared to him? But I just was so baffled by the Carlos Vinicius decision. For me, Spurs have been crying out for so long to have a striker that can come in when Harry Kane's injured. They finally do it. Even Mourinho speaks about it. He says, we've now got that other striker. Son is not a striker, he once told us. You need that kind of big focal point up front as well, someone that can hold up the ball. And the exact scenario happened where Vinicius was bought for and he's sitting on the bench. I just could not get my head around it. I saw it before the game and I just immediately thought to myself, right, you've got Bale, Bergwijn and Son up front. Who holds up the ball? Who wins the ball when you're going to get those guaranteed long balls from the back? And kind of in the end, it was none of them. Bale tried a couple of times. Bergwijn, fair play to him, tried. Son doesn't really do that. Son is one of those who kind of tries to disrupt the defender trying to head the ball rather than challenge in a header himself. Because it's not his game. It's not what he's really meant to be doing. And Spurs just had no focal point. They had no target man. They weren't holding the ball up front. It was rotten. It really was. And I don't think it was any shock that Vinicius came on at half-time. And I'd probably say, as I said earlier, it's probably the one bright point of the second half. Came on, held the ball up. There was a nice little back heel. I think it was to either Lucas or Lamella on the edge of the box to have a shot. He did his own lovely little turn and shot that the keeper did well to push away. He just added a little, just some emphasis to Tottenham's play and a little direction and someone that they could look for. I just could not get my head around why he didn't use him from the start. And even Mourinho praised Vinicius after the game and said he did well. And you kind of think, I know there's always a lot of praise for managers who make early changes or half-time changes. And Mourinho is one that does that a lot. I've always felt, again, who am I? But I've always felt if you're having to make early changes or half-time changes, it's because you got it wrong to begin with. I understand, of course, you have to tactically change to affect a game and stuff like that, but your team at the start should be able to do its job. Otherwise, what's the point of a starting 11 if you're going to be completely surprised by how the other team are playing in the first 45 minutes? And I just felt that with Vinicius. It was very much here's me kind of rectifying the mistake I made at the start of the game. And it'd be interesting to see what happens against Chelsea. He should really start. I think they need him to. I think they need him up there. There's all indications that Kane might be back earlier than expected. Mourinho said that Kane felt it was only going to be a couple of weeks. Obviously, we're going to be a week later on for the Chelsea game. You never know. Maybe West Brom, maybe for the Everton FA Cup match. But I think Vinicius, in the meantime, needs to be shown why he was bought. Because, people always have said in transfer windows, and I always have to kind of explain this point, people have always said, why can't we get Danny Ings? Why can't we get, say, Paulo Dybala? Why can't we have more than one top striker? And other clubs, look, they've got blah, blah, they've got blah, 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 blah. This shows you how all-consuming and dominant Harry Kane is at Tottenham. Even when he's not playing, the striker isn't playing instead of him. It's madness. And, we're not even just talking about Pochettino now. You're talking about another manager, and Mourinho, who are not playing the second striker. It's very weird. It's very weird, but I'd like to see Vinicius give him more of a go because Spurs are not playing well and the fixtures coming up are not kind. This was meant to be the period of the kind of after Christmas where Spurs were going to look at picking up some points, getting the ball rolling and kind of getting up that table. Because now you've got, who have you got? Chelsea, Everton, City, West Ham who are in good form in the Europa League. You've got West Brom obviously sandwiched in between as well coming up at the weekend. They're not easy games. None of them, really. Even West Brom, you'd probably see that as a banker. They're actually now, they made changes. Allardyce is trying to do things. You don't know what kind of results they're going to pick up now. Spurs need to kind of turn things around and get the momentum going again. Because, Mourinho talks about self-esteem and confidence and stuff after the game. And it just, should it be like that? Should it be that way with a team with that much quality? This is the thing. People moan about the transfer window and the squad being poor. I still maintain it's a really good squad. You cannot tell me that squad that was picked, the matchday squad, should have struggled as they did against Brighton or Fulham, a couple of weeks back. It's a very good squad with very talented players, and something's not right. It's not clicking, and I think, like I said, there's got to be some compromise somewhere with Mourinho and the players, and there's just this fear factor. There really is. Let's talk about the transfer window. Just before, because someone told me last time, you said you're not going to dwell on the match, and then you spoke for 20 minutes about it. Yes, we are technically 23 minutes in, but that wasn't really so much about the match. It was probably more about Mourinho and the relationship with everyone within the club. But yeah, transfer window. I've seen some people rather upset that, Mourinho wasn't backed, all of that. I'll be honest, did we really expect there to be transfers in this window? I know, again, I hate to use the FIFA and Football Manager analogy. I know we all love to make transfers and have transfers. Me as a fan and a writer, of course, I love to have transfers. But I don't think this was probably ever going to be a window where there was likely to be much transfer activity. I mean, we see it. It's probably going to be the lowest net spend in a transfer window by the Premier League clubs. It's got to be. It's got to be the record low. I haven't seen the figure, but, Liverpool only moved at the last minute because obviously they had the Matip injury as well on top of the Gomez and Van Dijk ones. So they quickly had to move for a couple of centre-backs. Elsewhere, I'm trying to remember any big moves. Did any clubs do anything? I'm I'm struggling. Trying to think of anyone. I know Everton tried at the end. No. I'm trying to think of Man United, Santiago, but that was one that was done in the summer. So it just wasn't really there. And in Spurs, I'm only going to mention it really quickly because it's really boring, but the foreign player issues, that obviously affected what they could do. I know that Spurs would have liked to have, if possible, have brought in a centre-back this January window. However, it was so dependent on so many other things happening and various players going and stuff like that, but that obviously didn't happen. We all like to say, oh, sell blah blah, sell player X, Y, or Z, but there's got to be people coming and wanting to buy players X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, they're going to sit there. No one knows that more than Tottenham. They've had so many players over the years on their books. Just look at Danny Rose. Someone could buy him, or not even buy him. Someone could probably come in and take him for a free transfer. No one is really seriously getting him. Whether that's because of him, whether that's because of the club's being a lack of interest. They can't even move on a player on essentially a free transfer who's an England international, or was only a year ago. And this is the thing, and then that has a knock-on effect. There were players left. They've sorted out They've sorted out some of the excess from the Europa League, what they call them, non-locally trained. So we've seen Jedson Fernandez. I don't think that was any shock. Obviously, he's had his loan brought to a close at Tottenham, and he's went back and across to Galatasaray in Turkey. Good luck to him. It was a very not a strange loan. It made sense at the time because Tottenham had injury problems with Sissoko out at the time. They needed cover, and it was a relatively cheapish loan. I don't think the permanent deal was ever going to be taken. It was like some silly fee. I can't remember. Maybe it was even 50 million, something like that. It just didn't work for him. Very young, didn't really show what he could do. Still hasn't really found his position, and I don't think it's any shock that he's moved on. But good luck. He's only 21. He could become a fantastic player. He's got a lot of potential. Just doesn't really know what kind of player he is yet, and I don't think Mourinho could even work it out. So he's moved on. Paulo Gazzaniga, I got word kind of early yesterday morning that Elche in La Liga, 19th in La Liga, were looking to bring him in. And over the course of the day, the talks over him kind of went well. So he's headed there on loan. I've seen people getting upset about that and saying, why is he not playing ahead of Hart? And again, sorry to be boring, foreign player issues. That's the reason he's there. Joe Hart is British, homegrown. Gazzaniga couldn't even get in the Europa League squad. Gazzaniga didn't even play a single minute, did he, for Tottenham this season? So it's good for him. It's a good move for him. Get him out there, get him playing some minutes, and then kind of look at the situation again in the summer. And that takes two of those out of... This is the thing that, when I see people saying, let's bring in this defender, this player, Sabitz or whatever, you've got to have other people go out the door first. And even Gazzaniga and Jensen leaving doesn't really make any difference. Spurs technically are still one over in their foreign player limit. They've got Joe Rodon. It's going to be interesting. I might ask Mourinho about it tomorrow. It depends. It might be one maybe for a future press conference. But I think he's going to have a decision to make. And I think he'll want to bring Joe Rodon into Europa League squad for the knockout stages. But to do so, he's going to have to lose a player. You look at that squad. You tell me which foreign player you take out of that squad to bring in Joe Rodon. This is the problem Spurs find themselves in. I see sometimes people saying, why are Tottenham like this and other clubs aren't? If you look at Sunday's match, there was not a single Englishman started that match for Tottenham at Brighton. It says it all. It says everything. Which for me, and again, we'll come to him in a little bit, makes it all the more crazy about the Dele Alli situation and why Spurs were pretty reluctant to let him go. It's mad. I mean, Japhet Tanganga, there were teams interested. I think Southampton, possibly Celtic, were sniffing around. But Spurs can't afford to let Tanganga go for a couple of reasons. First off, he's very versatile. He can play across the back line. Mourinho can use him at left back, right back, or in the centre. I think he's even played in a defensive midfield role once this season. Can't remember who it was. He came off the bench and played there. And he's homegrown. He's British. He's an academy product. So again, you can't let that kind of player go. So yeah, it's something that's kind of crippling Spurs a little bit at the moment. And I think when it comes to the summer, they're going to have a bit of an overhaul. Foreign players are going to have to try and really maybe get to a stage of actually trying to push them out the door rather than hoping a bid comes in, because they're clearly, I'd say the lack of quality doesn't come in terms of, maybe this is probably harsh, but the British players, certainly the ones that are considered homegrown, are probably, some of Spurs' better players, perhaps. That's not to say that some of the front players aren't absolutely incredible. The likes of Son and Højbjerg and Lloris and people like this, and Reguilon's come in, and many more that I haven't even mentioned. But I think there's excess kind of chaff in the squad, I think is the expression. The chaff in the wheat. Oh, I don't know. Someone will tell me. Essentially, it's there. It's in some of those places. In some, some of the players that have been here and not really done it, have not really hit the heights that the probably Spurs expected of them when they signed. And, they've got to start moving players on and then replace them with more quality. That's where the overhaul has to happen. It has to happen, and clearly in the next window, because this was just too difficult a window to kind of move players on at reasonable prices. So there were a lot of exits as well in terms of loans. Spurs Academy is absolutely, that's probably where all the biggest changes have been happening at that development squad level. You saw Troy Parrott came back from Millwall, went off to Ipswich. There was some debate over that one. There was a little period where he wasn't going to come back, and then I think they just kind of looked at the way Millwall were playing, and it just wasn't really suiting him. I've watched him a couple of times. I watched him in the Bristol City FA Cup match, and I've seen some Millwall fans moaning about him, but to be honest, the team was just so poor, and there's so little invention and movement. I talk about Spurs at Brighton. There wasn't a lot of. I think there's quality players, but I don't think they're playing with real quality right now, and that's no good for an 18-year-old who really has to get game time. So he's dropped down a level, gone into League One with Ipswich. Kind of hopefully that will reignite him. I think he's had those, whatever it is, 4, 5, 6 months to kind of feel the physical side of being a senior pro, getting battered a little bit in the Championship. And now this second half will be about him showing he can score goals and getting his confidence, and then coming back in the summer ready to kind of step on. Because, Harry Kane obviously played at various levels on loan. He wasn't just playing at the top level or the Championship. I'm pretty sure he had Aurier would have been League One or League Two when he was there. I'm trying to remember now. Long time ago. But all kinds of experiences are good for young players. They really are. So we had, who else do we have? Parrott, Jack Clark went out to Stoke. Harvey White went to Portsmouth. Brandon Austin went to Orlando City in the MLS. Jack Rolls went out late on yesterday to Stevenage, which is a really good move for him. I've got a little bit of an affinity with Stevenage. I used to cover them. We're back in my non-league and League Two reporting days, and obviously Spurs under 23s have a home there as well, so they play. I get to Stevenage a fair old bit of the Lamex. Who else went? Keziah Sterling. He'd come back from Southend, and he's gone out. Is it Greenock in Scotland? I think that takes him, maybe Rolls as well. I think potentially to the end of their contract. So obviously it sets them up for their future careers. Who else went? Shiloh Tracy went back out again. Joshua Uluwayemi went out. The young goalkeeper as well. He's gone out. Malachi Fagan-Walcott went off to, was it Dundee? It's got another Scotland loan, which is good for him. Very young, talented young defender, but he had I think it was a knee injury. So this is good for him to try and kind of get back into the feeling of football, get some senior minutes under his belt. I think he's already made his debut. Can't remember. I think he may have done already. And Jubril Okindina obviously went out as well. Cambridge United. So good, really good for them on a youth level. I know some people perhaps only bothered about the first team, but I love everything that happens underneath as well. I love the whole development of the young players, and and because kind of having that understanding that not every young player in the academy is going to become a Tottenham Hotspur player. In fact, it's actually incredibly difficult for them to do so. But there's going to be the elite will, and then the rest will have their, hopefully, a really long and successful football career, wherever it may be. And, we've seen some players leave. Maurizio Pochettino, Poch's son, has headed off to Watford to see, kind of try and step up to the first team there, which is great for him. Left a really classy message to Spurs. He could have been not awkward, but he could have had a little something against Tottenham after his dad was relieved of his duties, and he had a really awkward couple of months kind of after he went. But he kind of kept his head down, worked really hard, and hopefully now he makes it at Watford. That'd be great for him. Anthony Giorgio obviously gone out to Limassol in Cyprus. Jonathan De, I think he went back to Belgium this week as well. So, you only wish them the best and hope that they do well. And I'm sure Spurs will have certain interests. Well, they do. I think automatically they get a little percentage of future fees and stuff like that. But they also have a little interest as human beings. These players have grown up, a lot of them, and come through the system, and be good to see how they do. I mean, we spoke briefly about Danny Rose not moving on. Danny Rose, I don't know what's going to happen with him, to be honest. There's a part of me that feels it's such an incredible waste of the end of what's been a very good career on the whole. It's just hasn't really been a footballer for the last. It'll be a year now, and just kind of at the age. I think he's just turned 30. Could have potentially gone somewhere, had a good loan, got himself into the Euro squad. He was only in Southgate's plans. Well, certainly while he was at Newcastle, I think he was playing for England. So, incredible shame to see that happen. And it looks like now either he'll just sit out the rest of his contract and go somewhere in the summer. He can talk to foreign clubs about the summer move now, or whether Spurs come to some kind of agreement over a mutual contract thing. But you look at it, and is there a slim chance that he could possibly be registered for the Premier League? There are spots now in that squad with Jedson and Gazaniga going in the Premier League squad. It opens up a spot, especially for a British player. It's going to be down to Mourinho. I'd kind of be surprised. You can't rule it out entirely, but it would seem a very odd move to kind of bring him back in now, especially when you've got, Reguilon, Davies, Tanganga can kind of all play in a left-back role. Some people might say that Rose could do a better job than some of those. I don't know if it's the Danny Rose of old anymore, but we'll see what happens with him. And of course, Dele Alli. We can't kind of get away from the Dele Alli stuff. I've got to admit, personally, kind of happy he's still here. Actually, very happy he's still at Tottenham. I'm a Dele fan. I think he's had a tough couple of years. He still scored goals in those years. And, I don't want to harp on this too much because I think I've said this before, but I just feel that, form is temporary and class is permanent. And the kid's 24. I say kid, of course 24 you're not a kid, but you are still a young player. And I think this was always going to be the problem with Mourinho kind of deciding and putting his foot down and saying, Dele's not for me. The problem is Dele is for Tottenham. So, it's all very well him saying that, but Tottenham, I don't think were ever considering really letting him go permanently. It would be daft. Daniel Levy, we can criticise him for many things, but a bad businessman he's not. And you don't sell low. You don't sell in a poor market one of your most marketable assets. You could sell Dele Alli for, 20 million, say, to PSG. You could go to PSG, absolutely dazzle alongside Neymar and Mbappe, and Poch gets him going again. And he's an 80, £100 million player, And I think what needs to happen now, I know Spurs looked at a potential loan to PSG. They looked at, the possibility of that, but it very much would have been dependent on replacement coming in. They had a little look, mainly Eriksen's representatives made contact with Tottenham. The problem again, though, with that was pretty much, the homegrown stuff, the foreign player stuff, which I'm not going to go into too much because it's boring. But that would have only created more problems with that. And also, from what I understand, Inter were looking for a transfer fee as well. Can you imagine Spurs letting Eriksen go for 20 million, whatever it was, and now having to pay probably the same or more? It just doesn't work whatsoever. And also, these are players very much out of form. You talk about getting rid of Dele because maybe he's not in form. Eriksen is way off form, although hopefully for him, little signs that he might be coming back. I think Conte started to play him in a bit of a number 10 role, and I think he scored the lovely free kick in the Milan derby to win it late on. So hopefully for him, he starts to turn his career around. Don't wish ill on anyone just because they left Tottenham. But for Dele, now stuff has to happen, doesn't it? It serves no purpose for anyone for Dele to now sit for the remainder of this season on the sidelines doing nothing. If Spurs, again, like I said earlier, if Spurs are flying and Mourinho is absolutely smashing it with the club, you could say, all right, fair enough, Dele needs to stay on the sidelines. Spurs, I'd say Dele and Mourinho need each other right now. They may not know they need each other, but I do think they do. I think Dele will be hungry to play and prove a point, and of course he wants to get into England's Euro squad. Of course he does. Mourinho needs someone who can score goals. He needs someone that can set up goals. And, when you've got a guy that's, I think it's 121 goals in 234 appearances Dele's been involved in. 64 goals and 57 assists he's scored and laid on assists. He's even out of form. Dele makes stuff happen. And I just think there just needs to be a bit like the Dembele stuff last year. Mourinho has been wrong about players. Wrong or has changed his mind about players. So Dembele, Lo Celso, even Bergwijn, he wasn't his first choice in the January transfer window last year, but he's grown to really appreciate him and thinks there's a player he can really build with there. But and I think Dele, you look at the Amazon clips. I saw a little video the other day. It reminded me of it when he has the 1-to-1 with Dele Mourinho, and there were two real sides to it. There was Mourinho real kind of passion about what he could make of Dele and get the consistency going, and you kind of. And again, even as a big Dele Alli fan, I felt Dele Alli's whole body language throughout that whole meeting was quite telling. He was just like, there was just something, yep. I've got kids, anyone that's spoken to their kids knows that look. It's very much like, yeah, go on, you keep on talking. I don't care a word what you've got to say because I don't agree with it. And I just felt, there was that. And I saw the clip of what in the Leipzig match at half time when Dele came in criticising defensive football and just hoofing the ball up the pitch. And so there's got to be a compromise. They've got to come together and they've just got to say, look, we'll revisit this in the summer, but for now, let's just crack on. You want to play football, I want to win football matches. Let's just, you do what I say, and I won't dig you out in press conferences after a game saying because a flick you did 2 or 3 phases before a goal was scored by Stoke caused the goal. I won't do that. I'll have you back. And I think if that happens, I think it benefits everyone. I really think there can be winners. Everyone can be a winner in this scenario with Dele staying. Lo Celso's still not back from injury. And if Bale stuff just not firing at the moment. And I think that leaves that spot for Dele to come back in and make an impact for Son and Kane. He knows how to play with those guys. He knows how to score goals and set up goals for them. We know he does. He can't rely on the Son and Kane partnership all the time. And I think if Dele comes back into the fold, he's got to kind of play his way into form as well, like everyone. But it just seems a really kind of odd time to keep that. It is stubbornness, to keep him out of the team, really. So I hope if there's one positive out of this. It's an old cliche, but perhaps Dele Alli could be like a new signing. Perhaps he could. Everyone's been saying, or people have been saying, Spurs need a new kind of creative midfielder. Why can't it be Dele Alli? Let's get him back to where he was, and then let's see where it goes from there. So sorry, I've been waffling on for ages, but yeah, it's been a frustrating one, very frustrating, and I do worry about Thursday night against a Chelsea team that obviously have got fresh ideas and fresh motivation trying to impress their new manager. Spurs are going to have to be really up for it, really organised. Otherwise, it could be embarrassing, and at home as well. So let's see what happens. I hope it isn't. I don't want to end on a downer there. I hope it'd be really interesting to see whether Dele comes back from this injury that he currently has. Hopefully, comes back in quick time, and And maybe someone else can take a little chance to shine as well. It doesn't have to just be about Dele. Someone needs to step up. It could be Tanguy Dembele. Someone has to step up and just start taking games by the scruff of the neck, lead this team. Because, they need a bit of magic right now. So there you go. I'm going to head off. Again, apologies for the delay in videos. And apologies for the fact that I look like I'm being taken hostage. I'll sort that out. It's a very different room to what I've been used to. So I'll figure out the best place to sit and sort it out. But yeah, as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and look after yourselves. And I will catch you later. Bye.